Hey guys, it's Morgan here. It is officially fall. There is a massive storm going on outside my window. In honor of the change of seasons, I thought that I would go ahead and do a summer book wrap-up. So, as I was going through my book pile, I realized that I had quite a few books about books, so I went ahead and made that its own genre. They're all fiction, but I figured at this point there's enough of them that they should be in this review, their own little subsect. So the first book I want to talk about is Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore by Robin Sloan. It's about a man named Clay who has recently become redundant in his work as a designer. And he gets hired by this kooky old man to be the night clerk at a 24-hour bookstore. And there's a massive mystery surrounding the bookstore, and you kind of delve into that in secret society. There's a little bit of romance, but I wouldn't say that that's a key element to the plot. I enjoyed the reading experience immensely. The writing style was very fun and it breezes along very quickly. I wasn't particularly in love with the wrap-up, but I don't want to get too into that. But that was something that I don't really like books that end neatly. So the next book I have for you is Lost in a Good Book by Jasper Fforde. This is the second book in the Thursday Next series, which if you haven't read, get on it because it's so fun. I actually enjoyed Lost in a Good Book more than I did the first book, The Air Affair. It is a alternate reality series in which all kinds of things are wackadoodle, but there's a certain faction of the government that can go into books, and they're assigned to protect the integrity of literary classics. So if that isn't enough to make you want to read it, there's also dodo birds in it. I don't know. That's a plus for me. The next book I want to talk about is The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. This is another just really happy, just warm, fuzzy book. It's written from the perspective of various narrators, and it's all written in the form of letters, which is a very difficult thing to pull off, and not have it be too contrived, but also have very distinct viewpoints from each of your characters. And both of those things are pulled off so well. And it gives me a sort of nostalgia for a time that I never existed in. I don't know, a lot of things set post-World War II give me that feeling. Maybe it's a past life, I don't know. But this is definitely warm fuzzies. The second I finished it, I gave it to my mom to read, and she has warm fuzzies, and now she's passing it around to all of her friends. The last book in my books about books segment is The Readers of Broken Wheel Recommend. My biggest takeaway is I did enjoy it. I did think it could have been shorter. There's a lot in this book that I felt kind of dragged on. About the midpoint of this book, I was kind of like, let's pick it up. There's quite a bit of time that plods along. But ultimately it's fun and it's charming. It's about a girl from Sweden who comes to the middle of nowhere America to visit her pen pal, and they've been writing about books, and they plan to read a bunch of books together, and plot twists ensue. Wow, I'm finding it's really hard to talk about books without giving too much away. Please advise in the comments how to handle this, because I see people do it all the time in book reviews, but now that I'm doing it, I'm like, how do I sidestep and not talk about things? What was I talking about? Yes. Okay, next we're gonna go into historical fiction, and the first book I have in this is Salt to the Sea. This book will give you some feels. It's another one that has multiple narrators, and all of them have very clear viewpoints. One downfall with that was I definitely found certain narratives more interesting than others, to the point that it made me want to speed read through certain bits of narrative. And it does wrap up a little too nicely, but the bulk of the book is very interesting. Something that I appreciate about it is it was a event during that war that I knew nothing about, and I feel like a lot of people didn't, so I like that it calls attention to that. Which brings me to my next book, which is Ludlow by David Mason. This book is actually, it's a novel written entirely in verse, and it's beautiful and heartbreaking, and I blazed through it, and then I started again because it just was so gripping. And the characters are just so well written, but because it is written in verse, it truly walks this line between being poetry and being just a classic novel. And I've never read anything that handles that style of writing as well as this does. Very highly recommended. 5 stars. Let's go ahead and go nonfiction for a bit. So the first book I have to talk to you about is Gypsy Boy by Mikey Walsh. It's hard to talk about because it's someone's memoir. It's somebody's autobiography. And it basically follows a young boy growing up in a Roma gypsy family, and he eventually rebels and discovers himself and leaves it. But it's a very arduous and heartbreaking and painful process. And while I enjoyed the writing, like, it is fairly well written, it does become sort of a misery memoir, if you know what I'm saying, and it is hard to get through. And then the end just ties up so abruptly that you feel kind of like shell-shocked. So I have kind of mixed feelings about this one. Next up is A History of the World in 6 Glasses, which, shockingly, is about the history of the world in 6 glasses. And I enjoyed it. It's fine. There's nothing particularly remarkable about it, but I did get a lot of trivia, which is great because I'm really bad at small talk. So if you want to know why we clink glasses when we're cheersing, this book will hook you up. This next book I'm a little embarrassed to talk about, but I'm going to anyways, and it's You Are a Badass. This is the one and only self-help book I've ever read, so I don't really have a lot to, like, compare it to, but I did really enjoy it. It's one of the reasons that I decided to, like, say screw it and jump in with YouTube, so I can't say anything bad about this book. So if you're feeling down and directionless, pick up a copy. It's worth it. I'm toying with the idea of doing a full review of this next book, so I don't want to say too much, but Girls and Sex by Peggy Orenstein is heartbreaking and painful and a great, great read. And now on to my last category, which is just straight up fiction. I'm not even going to talk much about this. This is awesome. I think we all know it's awesome. I don't know why I took so long to read it. I needed this book in my life. This is another one that is not my favorite, which sucks because Patrick Ness is life, but not so much. It's about an aging man and his estranged daughter, and he finds new love, and it feels like he tries to do too much. If he had just stuck to the bare bones plot that he was working with, there would have been a beautiful Patrick Ness novel in there, because he really does have that gripping, gorgeous writing style, and he plays with words a lot, and there's like parallel stories, but he adds this mysticism that just kind of muddies the waters, and it's a bummer because I was really looking forward to this, but I hadn't heard anyone talk about it, and it is by one of my favorite authors, so that was probably a good sign that I wasn't going to love it, but I digress. The last book I'm going to talk about is one that I just recently finished, and it is Heft by Liz Moore. This book so easily could have been bad. It could have been contrived and overdone, but it is so heartbreakingly honest and beautiful and painful, and it's just, I'm a little obsessed with this right now. Our lead character is a man named Arthur Opp, who is a 550-pound agoraphobe who does not leave his Brooklyn brownstone. And he's so isolated and used to his own filth and his own world that he's just closed himself off, and the book sort of follows his journey with like trying to reach out and connect to people, but there's a parallel story with this high school senior who's a complete like baseball prodigy, but he in his own way has done the same thing that Arthur has and closed himself off from the world and won't let himself be loved or reached out to, and it's just gorgeous. And something I really appreciate about it is it doesn't end in some happy they become friends and ride off into the sunset, which I was really worried it was going to. It ends perfectly, and it's just beautiful and heartbreaking, and like I said, just so honest. All right, well, those are some of my rather rambly summer reads. I'm more than happy to do a full review on any of them if anyone's interested. But thank you so much for listening to me, and I will see you in my next video. Bye guys!